The first pillar of power is what we call spiritual altars. Spirits are light on altars, and altars are the convergence point of spirits. A man without an altar will remain a storyteller all his life. Every time power was wrought in scripture, there was an altar backing the one that commanded power. If there is no altar in a man's life, forget it. It's a story. I will show you what an altar is, but let me show you two scriptures very quickly that validates this position. In 1 Samuel chapter 7 verse 12 to verse 14, the Philistines were making a mess of Israel. Israel began to live in tremble. The armies of Israel were rendered helpless in the face of the prevailing circumstances. And Samuel realized something. He said there is a way to unlock the spiritual dimension of Israel. Israel is not only natural, because he said, who are the Israelites? He said, unto whom pertaineth the covenant, the giving of the law, the promises. In Romans chapter 9 verse 4, Israel is not only natural. If Israel wants to take advantage of only his natural side, he will be vulnerable. So the only way Israel will prevail is to unlock the supernatural side. And what is the way to unlock it? He said he hewn a rock and he planted it as an altar, and he called the name of the rock Ebenezer. And he said the hand of God was perpetually against the Philistine. And he said the Philistine ran back and never returned all the days of Samuel. How did Samuel invoke power? By erecting an altar. Every time an altar appears, a spirit is commanded. The integrity of a spirit responds to altars, because altars are the lighting spots of spirit. If a man can erect an altar, that man can command the presence of a spirit. The way to summon and to keep spirits working with you is by the altars that back you up. Without altars, there will be no power. And I tell you the truth, there are many Christians without altars. I'm not talking about going to raise a stone. I will tell you how to raise an altar in this dispensation. The hand of God was perpetually. God decided to become biased. So long as you have an altar, God is on your side. The Bible said God commanded Israel to wipe out the sons of Ammon, and they were destroying them utterly. The king took 700 of his finest soldiers. He tried to break through the garrison of Israel. It was impossible. And then he carried his son, who was heir to the throne, smashed him on the wall and made an oblation to God. Instantly, he said the indignation of God turned against Israel. It's a mystery. The moment a man understands the role of an altar, he can summon a spirit. This is what happened. It was God that told Israel to kill the king, but the king knew something. Because spirits are legalistic creatures. Spirits are legalistic beings. The moment you know the way of a spirit, you can manipulate that spirit. And one of the ways to manipulate spirit is by altars. If a spirit sees an altar, it becomes impossible for that spirit to stay in one position. The altar regulates him. The way of men of power is the way of altars. There's a way to rule. It's the way of the altars. God spoke to Abraham. He said, get thee out of thy country, out of thy kindred, and out of thy family, and come to the land that I will show you. In blessing I will bless you. Genesis chapter 12 from verse 1 to 3. Abraham heard God, but it doesn't mean anything will change. The moment Abraham entered Moriah, in Genesis 12 verse 6, he said he raised an altar to the Lord that appeared to him. Abraham migrated from Moriah and came to Bethel. Genesis 12:7, he said he raised an altar to the Lord. Genesis 13 to 18, Abraham came to Mamre. He raised an altar to the Lord. He knew the secret of power. And when you see this man commanding things without thinking, you think it's by mimicking them. If you wear a white suit and you don't have an altar, you'll be in trouble. It's not an act, it's a life in the spirit. He had an altar, and Abraham did so many terrible things that you can't explain with English language. In Genesis chapter 14 verse 14 to 15, they took Lot, Abraham's cousin, and 5 kings attacked a nation, took Abraham's cousin, and the Bible said Abraham took 318 trained servants of his household, and he did something. He said Abraham divided himself among them. Where did he learn it from? Because on altars we learn mysteries. Abraham was the one that had the covenant. He said Abraham divided himself among them. So there were 319 Abraham, and one Abraham is a nation. So it was now 319 nations against 5 nations. There's no way you can win. He learned it on the altar. He divided himself. Abraham is a nation, and there became 319 Abraham. So 319 against 5, how can you win? So he came back with spoils. There are mysteries they know. There are mysteries these men know, because they decided to commit their lives to altars. You know, sometimes when you read scripture, you approach it and say it's Bible, so you read it religiously. The things this man did, close the Bible, sit down, and meditate upon it in your time. You will know that we are not spiritual men. We are talkers. We are talkers. Meanwhile, the same dimension we are talking about is preserved in the negative supernatural. The guys in the demonic can simply go to a herbalist and carry out a simple sacrifice, come out, shoot them, it will not enter. They know it's not trial and error. It's not. They will do that thing they do. They carry a gun, shoot them, it will not enter. How are they able to preserve these powers in so much potency, and they can replicate it any day, any time? And when it comes to the church, it's story. If you go to the village today and you have a barrier, they can move the rain, they will move the cloud. It's not something to look at, it's normal. And if you don't settle them, they will move a cloud from 2 kilometers and bring that cloud to where your venue is, and the rain will fall exactly where your venue is. And it's not a testimony, it's a normal thing. Because they know the way of power. We will know language. An altar, in its most simplistic sense, is commitment to deity. In the New Testament context, it's not a pillar of stone. It's commitment to deity. God will make a demand of you, and you will be committed to that demand as though you swore an oath, by 2 immutable things in which God cannot lie. There must always be an oath. So every demand God makes on your life becomes an altar. If you keep to it, God will be committed. So there are many of us today that we don't even remember the demand God makes of us after 3 days. There are certain people, God came to them and said, don't be defiled until you get married. And God told them when they were in secondary school, but they didn't know it was an altar. So they let go. They thought, what is about this virginity? They say, you are not a wise person. You are a local. You have lost the secret of your power. If you like, go for 1,000 impartation service. You have lost something. You will never recover from it. There are certain people, God comes and tells them, every time money comes to your hand, give me 30%. It's not written anywhere in the Bible that you should give 30%. But your life belongs to God. So everything you own belongs to God. But the person doesn't know it's an altar. So he's looking for the doctrine that validates it. Why should I give 30%? Is it not 10%? I'll give you my 10% now. That's why your life will look powerless. Because what God is trying to do is to give an excuse to always respond to you regardless of the circumstance. Because an altar is a divine excuse for intervention. You come home, you are listening to secular song. He said, no more. You don't know it's an altar. And then once in a while, you say, oh boy, this thing no easy. This thing no easy. Those loopholes you open is what the devil will exploit. God shows up. He said, for you, no more Twitter, no more Instagram, no more Facebook. And then after 3 days, okay, what did that person say there? You delete Facebook from your phone, but you are looking at it in somebody else's phone. You don't know it's an altar. And when an altar is erected, a spirit is watching. A spirit is watching. and then you don't know why you are crying and making demand and nothing happen, you will not be powerful, because you violate the demands of altar. The road to power is not so difficult, but will you keep the demands of power? Go and check your life. Every time you had a conspicuous shift, there was something you obeyed. Every time. Because these are not the reason why God gives you the power in the first place, but it's a sign of commitment that you are mature to handle it. Because you don't cast precious things to swine. They will trample on it because they don't know their value. The secret to power, when we rise up, it's our consecration that speak, not our voices. Because when we talk, the spirits know. They see through the canopy of darkness. They know what God told you, and they know whether you kept the demands of that covenant. That's why we are numerous, but we are not strong. We are weak. Many are infantile. He gathered 32,000 people, but at the end of the day, only 300 were ready for war. Our strength is not in our number. Our strength is in our stature. And the stature of a man is the depth of his commitment to the spirit that he pays allegiance to. What is the level of your commitment? Christians are not committed to nothing. Nothing. And even when God puts his word in the mouth of his servant and tells them, because they have a wrong mindset, they think you want to exploit them. And that's why their life is not working. Meanwhile, the people that are making an impact, they don't have any problem. It's the poor man and the weak man that is always checking whether he's about to be robbed. What do you have? The guy who trekked to church thinks you want to take his money. But the guy who flew a private jet, before you say it, he has responded. Does it not occur to you that there is a knowledge they know? There is an understanding they have that you don't have. You, that all you have in your account is 3,000. You are the one who think they want to steal your money. But the guy that has $1 billion is not complaining. And you don't know why he keeps having more. He said the one that has more and wants to have, even the one that has nothing but does not want to have more, the little he has will be taken from him and given to the one that has more and what will have more. My friend says divine partiality. It's a law in the spirit. We will struggle for a long time until we become committed.